So I've just received the masters for my next album, Dead Reckoning, and I thought I'd sit down, have a listen to it, and talk a bit about the album, some of the themes and ideas behind the songs. You know, in what sort of a setting might they take place? You know, what do I see or hear when I hear these songs? And just share that general background. In this video, I won't be doing a deep dive into the technical or compositional or arrangemental aspects. This is just going to be sort of more general ideas, general themes. And we're going to do that compositional, sort of more technical video later on. So I thought we could start off with the name of the album itself, which is Dead Reckoning. Now, in addition to sounding epic and big and perhaps a bit ominous, it's actually a naval term used in navigation. So Dead Reckoning is basically the process of calculating your current position based on the knowledge of a previous position, and then you take into equation your course and speed and elapsed time. And that will give you the possibility of calculating where you are actually right now. The process of Dead Reckoning is really what we all do with our lives. We hopefully know roughly where we are right now, and we're trying to figure out where we want to go in life. And you're throwing a bunch of components or elements in there to sort of calculate where you're going. And of course, you have an aim. It's a different story whether you actually get to that aim, but it's really a fundamental part of our lives. I wanted the album to have a name that sort of course, has the immediate appropriate connection to the theme, but also some sort of a, meta that describes some of these more perhaps archetypal qualities that we all have in our lives. So that's enough of the name. So for me, the goal was to essentially combine two things. Firstly, you would obviously have the big sound of an orchestra. And secondly, you would have period instruments, basically any instrument that you would find from that time period, and especially instruments that you could find on board a ship, something that the pirates would be playing on the deck or in a tavern or a bar. So my goal was to take that period instrument component and then bring that together with the orchestra. And two obvious references in that regard come to mind. Probably not surprisingly, the first one being Hans Zimmer's Pirates of the Caribbean, which I think he did some tremendous work on those soundtracks, especially on I believe it's the third movie, which I've listened to quite a bit. So the orchestral component of Dead Reckoning is sort of, leaning towards that sort of a style. And the second reference would be the work Bear McCreary did for Black Sails. And actually when that came out, or rather when I actually saw the series, I was very happy to see that he was really into the idea of bringing that rawness and some of those period instruments and some of those real instruments that you would have found during, around that time, on board a ship or wherever. Essentially for Dead Reckoning, my approach was to bring those two together, and that's how I would describe the soundscape of the album. Writing a pirate-themed orchestral album has been on my mind for as long as I've even remotely thought of writing orchestral music. And, it's one of those periods in time that is really fascinating. Obviously, a lot of horrendous things happened during that time period, but nonetheless, an extremely interesting time in history, a very unique time in history. And that's obviously why the interest in piracy and pirates, and especially the golden age of piracy, why that interest has sustained itself for such a long time. There's a fundamental quality to that we're drawn to this sort of Wild West at sea. You have all of these different countries sort of focused around one area, the Caribbean and the surrounding seas, and there's a lot of different cultures coming together, essentially in a new world, in a new place, and this sort of idea of freedom and, in some sense, entrepreneurship. These were people who wanted to take hold of their own destiny. Obviously, did some pretty horrible things on the way towards that destiny, but regardless, looking at the kind of the meta qualities of that period in time, it's a tremendously fascinating thing.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
I don't want to glorify what the pirates were or what they did, but despite all the horrendous murdering and things like that, they were a remarkably entrepreneurial group of people who wanted to attain their own type of freedom in this very conflicted part of the world. And perhaps somewhere in that process, they found a unique bond with one another and sort of this mentality and mindset of a different sort. All right, I think that's enough for the groundworks for this album. Now let's jump into the music itself.